The Watcher in the Woods. It was the summer of '72. I was 12, a gangly kid with a wild imagination and a love for the outdoors. Our family had rented a secluded cabin in the Adirondacks for the month, a place my parents hoped would ground me in nature and away from the distractions of city life. The cabin was a charming, rustic affair, nestled deep in the woods. There was a certain allure to its isolation, a promise of adventure and freedom. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, an undercurrent of unease began to seep into our idyllic retreat. It started with strange occurrences. Objects would disappear, only to reappear in odd places. A child's toy found its way into the living room, though none of us had brought one. The old, creaky floorboards seemed to groan with an eerie life of their own, especially at night. Then came the shadows. I'd catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye. Dark, shifting shapes that seemed to move with an intelligence of their own. At first, I dismissed them as tricks of the light, or perhaps the result of spending too much time alone in the woods. But as days passed, these shadows grew more defined, more menacing. One night, I was awakened by a sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from deep within the woods. Fear, cold and primal, seized me. Heart pounding, I crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. My breath caught in my throat. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at me from the edge of the woods, two burning orbs that seemed to pierce the night. I tried to shake off the fear, to convince myself it was a deer or a raccoon. But something about those eyes was different. They were intelligent, almost human. And they were watching me. Over the next few nights, the encounters became more frequent. I would see the creature, or at least its eyes, lurking in the shadows near the cabin. It seemed to be studying us, waiting. A sense of dread settled over our family. We grew increasingly on edge, our laughter replaced by hushed whispers. One evening, as I sat alone on the porch, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. There, standing in the twilight, was a figure, tall, gaunt, with skin as pale as moonlight. Its eyes were the same ones I'd seen in the woods, but now they were filled with a cold, predatory gleam. I screamed, and the creature vanished into the gathering darkness. From that moment on, the cabin was no longer a place of refuge, but a prison. We packed our bags and left the next morning, never to return. Years have passed since that summer, and the memories have faded somewhat. But the image of those eyes, burning in the darkness, still haunts me. I've often wondered what that creature was, and why it chose our family. Some say it was a hallucination, a product of a child's overactive imagination. But I know the truth. Whatever it was real, and it was evil. And to this day, I still look over my shoulder, half expecting to see those eyes staring back at me. The years that followed were a desperate attempt to outrun the shadows of that summer. I moved, changed jobs, even countries, but the fear was a constant companion. It lurked in the corners of my vision, whispered in the rustle of leaves, and chilled my blood in the dead of night. Then, 10 years later, a peculiar letter arrived. It was addressed to me, but the return address was a small, forgotten town in the Adirondacks. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant yet somehow sinister. The letter contained only one sentence: "You left something behind." A chill ran down my spine. I knew exactly what it meant. Driven by a morbid fascination and a desperate need for closure, I returned to the cabin. It was as I remembered, a relic of the past, shrouded in a melancholy stillness. The woods had grown, their canopy thicker, casting an even deeper gloom. As I stepped inside, a wave of memories washed over me. The familiar scent of pine and damp earth, the creaking floorboards, the oppressive silence, it was all there, intensified by the passage of time. That night, as darkness enveloped the cabin, I felt a presence. It was subtle at first, a shift in the air, a whisper on the wind. Then, the familiar glow of eyes appeared at the window. My heart pounded in my chest, a rhythm echoing the frantic beat of my life. I wasn't afraid this time. Fear had been my constant companion for a decade. Now, it was merely a dull ache. What I felt instead was a cold, determined resolve. I had faced this creature before, and I would do it again. Armed with a flashlight and a heavy kitchen knife, I stepped out into the night. The woods were alive with strange sounds, a symphony of the unknown. I moved slowly, carefully, my senses heightened. The creature was out there, I knew it. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I whirled around, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. There, in the pale moonlight, stood the figure I had dreaded. Taller than a man, with elongated limbs and those same haunting eyes, it moved towards me with an eerie grace. I lunged, the knife glinting in the beam of the flashlight. The creature let out a guttural scream, unlike anything human. We wrestled in the undergrowth, a silent battle for survival. My strength was waning, but so was its. In a final, desperate move, I drove the knife deep into its chest. It howled in agony, a sound that seemed to echo through the woods. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, it collapsed. Exhausted and trembling, I stood over the fallen creature. It was larger than I remembered, its skin pale and translucent. As I examined it, I noticed something strange, a tattoo, a symbol I couldn't decipher. It was then that I realized the horror of my situation. I had not killed a monster, but something far more sinister. A sense of dread washed over me as I looked up at the sky. The first rays of dawn were beginning to paint the horizon. I knew then that this was not the end, but merely a beginning. The creature I had killed was just one of many, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. As the sun rose, casting its light on the desolate cabin, I turned and walked away. The woods behind me seemed to whisper, a chilling promise of horrors to come. I carried with me the weight of the unknown, the fear of what lurked in the shadows, and the chilling certainty that this was far from over. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a hunter, and the creature in the woods was just the first of many battles to come. The world beyond the cabin was a different place now. The woods, once a source of wonder, were now a place of dread. I became a solitary figure, haunted by shadows and echoes of that night. Sleep was a fickle mistress, offering brief respites from the nightmares that clawed at my sanity. I started to research, delving into local folklore and forgotten histories. There were whispers of strange occurrences in the area, tales of disappearances and unexplained phenomena. I found old newspaper clippings, accounts of lost hunters and missing children. The more I learned, the deeper the rabbit hole seemed to go. One name kept recurring, Silas Thorne, a recluse who had lived in the woods decades ago, a man said to have made a pact with darkness. The locals spoke of him in hushed tones, a figure of fear and superstition. Determined to uncover the truth, I returned to the cabin, this time with a purpose. I spent days combing through the old, dusty attic, searching for any clue, any sign of Silas Thorne. And then I found it, a hidden compartment in the wall, filled with strange artifacts. There were dried herbs, strange symbols etched into bone, and a book bound in human skin. The book was a grimoire, a dark tome filled with forbidden knowledge. It spoke of creatures of shadow, beings from beyond the veil, and rituals to summon them. The name Silas Thorne appeared frequently, his signature a chilling scrawl at the bottom of each page. As I delved deeper into the book, I realized the terrifying truth. The creature I had killed was merely a guardian, a protector of something far more sinister. The woods were not simply haunted, they were a gateway to a realm of darkness, a place where shadows took tangible form. Fear gnawed at me, a constant companion. But with it came a strange resolve. I had opened a door, and now I had to close it. I was the only one who could stop whatever was coming. I began to prepare. I studied ancient texts, learned the language of the grimoire. Days turned into nights as I immersed myself in the dark arts. It was a dangerous path, but it was the only way. The night of the ritual arrived, a cold, moonless night. The woods were silent, save for the eerie creaking of the old cabin. As the first stars appeared, I began the ceremony. The room filled with a strange energy, a tangible darkness that seemed to seep from the walls. As the ritual reached its climax, the ground trembled. A cold wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing the candles. Darkness enveloped me, complete and utter. And then I heard it, a low growl, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was coming. I stood my ground, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the final battle. The darkness pressed against me, a tangible force. And then, from the shadows, it emerged. A towering figure, its form indistinct in the darkness. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity. I raised my arms, the symbols of the ritual etched in my mind. A battle for the soul of the woods was about to begin.